Back live for the third time today. We've got a very special broadcast, and I really want to thank my next guest, of course, Larry Klayman of Freedom Watch. Larry, welcome back to the show.
Thanks, Jason. As always, my pleasure, good friend.
I really appreciate you coming on tonight. You're in the midst of some of the most important legal cases. I mean, let's face it, in history, and you're taking time out of your schedule to come discuss these legal matters with us and the audience, so I really thank you for doing that. I also want to make sure that everybody knows we're going to be discussing some sensitive things, so before we begin, Larry, if there's anything that I touch on that might have an impact on the legal case that you can't speak about for whatever reason, obviously just let me know that and we'll move on. I want people to remember that it's really important that Larry has our financial support. FreedomWatchUSA.org is the website, and for months Larry has been calling for the removal of Robert Mueller. This is not a matter of opinion or conservative views versus liberal views. Robert Mueller is engaged in a very specific process that is governed by law, but oddly, the law is not being applied. What is going on there, Larry?
There are a couple things that are going on right now. I've dealt with a special counsel recently. I'm thankful that the indictment of Roger Stone effectively exonerates my client, Dr. Jerome Corsi. Dr. Jerome Corsi is not collaborating against Roger Stone. This is all spin by Roger Stone. He's doing this to try to raise money, to create sympathy. It's uncalled for, but nobody ever wished Roger Stone harm. But the reality is this, is that Jerry turned over everything that he had to the special counsel, and he testified honestly to the best of his ability. When he forgot something, he went back and he amended the testimony. If you look at the indictment of Roger Stone, Roger didn't do that. Okay, and that's why he's in the hot water that he's in now, because he apparently, according to that indictment, allegedly, he lied about what documents he had, whether they were regular documents or emails or texts, and he allegedly threatened the witness, Randy Credico, as well as Randy Credico's dog, which is witness tampering and obstruction of justice. So there's a big difference between Jerry Corsi and Roger Stone, and Roger Stone's trying to make Jerry Corsi the scapegoat to deflect from his own predicament, and it's a really serious predicament. But we have never done anything to try to harm Roger Stone. To the contrary, he's been trying to do that with Jerry Corsi for his own strategic reasons.
Right. Now, Larry, how specifically does the indictment of Roger Stone help Dr. Corsi or exonerate him, as you said?
Goes through what happened, okay? Goes through person one, that's Jerry Corsi. Person two, that's Randy Credico. And it states exactly how they provided information. And therefore, it's clear that Jerry's information was acceptable to the special counsel. And it doesn't accuse person one, Jerry Corsi, of any wrongdoing. Now, we know that Robert Mueller writes indictments that are speaking indictments. So if there was something that Corsi had done that was illegal or wrong, you can bet it would be in that indictment. To the contrary, what they allege Stone has done, they state are crimes, 7 counts of crimes. So that's the difference. I wrote a column last week at WND.com, and you can find it at LarryKlayman.com. It talks about a tale of two targets. So you can see how the special counsel views Jerome Corsi and how it views Roger Stone. But that is not because Jerry Corsi provided any information to in any way try to incriminate Roger Stone. He just simply provided truthful information. And that's what he's required to do. So when you hear arguments, that you see on TV like Sean Hannity and others who say, well, what about James Comey that testified falsely? What about James Clapper that testified? What about all these other people that testified falsely like Hillary Clinton? Yes, they should be prosecuted. But that doesn't exonerate the people who don't testify truthfully, as alleged to be the case with Roger Stone. It does not exonerate those people from having allegedly threatened the witness. So, yes, it's wrong and it's unjust and it's unfair. But when you hear Hannity use that as an excuse to run, interference for Roger Stone, That's neither sincere nor honest. So we're not seeking to have Roger Stone convicted or indicted or anything like that. I simply represent a client, Jerome Corsi. I'm doing the best I can as his defense counsel, along with my co-counsel, David Gray, to defend him. And that's why the indictment of Robert Mueller was so telling, because Corsi could have been accused of wrongdoing. He could have been indicted on the same day. He wasn't. So we're relatively confident that Jerry Corsi is out of the woods, and he should not be used as a whipping boy because Roger Stone wants to raise money.
Got it.
And wants to deflect from his own difficulties.
I think I understand your statement better now. You're saying that the indictment is basically an indication of the direction. The indictment of Roger Stone is an indication of the direction that Robert Mueller's investigation is going.
That's correct. There's somebody at my door, and my dog is barking. Okay.
No problem. Do you want to address that?
Okay, let's continue on.
Well, you can address the door if you want, and I can wait a moment. Okay, no problem. So, all right, let's talk about this indictment for a minute, because I got to tell you, it's all very troubling to me. I mean, I don't know Roger Stone well. I don't know Alex Jones well. I've met Roger 2 or 3 times, spoken very limited amount to him, but I really feel troubled by all of the things that have been said about Dr. Corsi. I know Dr. Corsi very well. He's always been nice to me, and I come back to this thing. The whole problem is over whether or not these guys communicated with WikiLeaks, which is so far removed from this concept of Russian interference. And frankly, I go to this indictment. I mean, obviously, I'm not a lawyer, Larry, and the closest thing I've come to law school is the conversations I've had with you. But just even when I read this first introduction here, it's talking about the DNC and the DCCC basically hired a security company, Company One, which we all know as CrowdStrike, to identify the extent of the intrusions. And on June 14th, 2016, through this Company One, which is CrowdStrike, which is a privately owned company owned by former FBI, I don't know what his role at the FBI was, but Sean Henry, and also Russian, expatriate, I guess we would call him, Dmitry Alperovich. Well, these guys looked at it and they publicly announced that it had been hacked by the Russian government. Now, we've had a lot of people come out and say that it hasn't been hacked, that it's been leaked. So I'm sort of stuck on this. Like, this is the basis of the whole thing. This company that's paid by the DNC, that is not the FBI, but some private company.
Here's the thing. I can cut to the chase, and we can talk about that stuff, okay?
Sure.
I have no knowledge of what went on or didn't go on in this regard. But this indictment is not about that. Now, Mueller writes speaking indictments. He wants to tell a story because he's trying to create a narrative that's suggesting there's Russian collusion. But the indictment of Roger Stone is not about Russian collusion. The indictment of Roger Stone is about lying under oath to the House Intelligence Committee. It's about threatening a witness. That's what it's about. So the fact that there's no Russian collusion does not let Roger Stone off the hook in terms of what he's alleged to have done. And you might remember that we, impeached a president, Bill Clinton, for lying about, his relationship with Monica Lewinsky. I mean, in the overall circumstance of things, I don't think anybody today cares whether he had a relationship or not. Maybe they sympathize with him, given, Hillary Clinton. I'm not condoning extramarital affairs, believe me. But that's not what this indictment's about.
Right.
And it doesn't let Roger Stone escape the charges that he's got because there's no Russian collusion. That's the problem.
So if Roger Stone had amended his written statements, which I presume was he given the opportunity to do that, why would he not do that? You're saying Dr. Corsi had forgotten. They do this interrogation technique where they try to trap these guys in statements that they can later say, oh, you lied. And they did that to Dr. Corsi, but Dr. Corsi amended his statement because he said, I didn't lie, I forgot, and now I remember. Is that correct? I
don't know why Roger Stone didn't do that. I don't know why he didn't, but apparently it went beyond the statements. It's the fact documents weren't provided. Remember, Mueller's playing with what is most likely a full deck of cards. Okay, he knows what's out there, and he knows what Roger Stone didn't provide. So Roger has a tendency to think that he's smarter than everybody else, that he can outsmart them. But apparently it didn't work this time if what is in that indictment is true. And that's what I'm saying with regard to the defamation towards Dr. Corsi and me and others. He thinks he can outsmart anybody. But it looks like this time it's not probably going to work, particularly with this judge, Amy Berman Jackson, who's very, very tough. And probably Friday he's going to be put under a gag order with everybody else, including, his friend Michael Caputo that comes out for him. So, Jerry never thought he was smarter than anybody else. He just turned everything over. And if he didn't remember something at that time, he came back and he said, here's what I now remember. And he was open and honest. And that's what I'm saying about this indictment of Roger Stone. Is it doesn't accuse Dr. Corsi as person one of doing anything illegal. And he could have done that. Mueller could have done that. And remember that Jerry turned down a sweetheart plea agreement and said, no, I'm not going to testify falsely. I'll risk everything before I do that. And this is the kind of person that I have as a client. And that's why I believe in him and why I'm representing him. And that's the distinction. But yes, does Mueller put stuff in there and his staff because they want to create an impression? They want to communicate with the public. They do have an agenda. They do want to bring the president down. It's clear. I mean, they're all partisans on that prosecutorial team.
Right.
But Dr. Corsi simply said, look, I'm a partisan too. I love the president of the United States, but I'm going to tell the truth. And he has.
And so, Larry, a speaking indictment, I get from what you're saying that it's a sort of a narrative built into the indictment so it reads like a story. What's the alternative way that an indictment would be prepared? Just a list of charges?
Yeah, they could have simply said that we asked for the House Intel Committee asked for these documents. They weren't provided. When Roger Stone was asked, did they exist? He said they didn't exist. They do exist, and therefore that is perjury. It could have been just as simple as that.
Wow. So unfortunately, I haven't had a chance to study this indictment as closely as I'd like to, and I'm not even sure that I'd know what I'm reading if I did. How does this compare at a 24-page indictment for 7 counts? Is that long? Is that short? Is that?
I wouldn't say it's overly long. I mean, 7 counts are a lot of counts.
Right.
But like I said, there's a lot of verbiage in here that didn't need to be in there. So yes, you can see the special counsel's agenda in the way it's written. And, nobody agrees with that agenda. Remember that Jerry Corsi is the only one. Roger Stone hasn't done this, you see. Roger Stone's the only one that's filed criminal complaints with regard to the special counsel.
Jerry Corsi, you mean, is the only one who's filed?
Jerry Corsi, the only one who's done that. And then he filed a civil complaint for $350 million. It was amended in the Washington Post, and its owner, Jeff Bezos, were included. So Jerry put his money where his mouth is. Okay, Jerry's not just mouth. He actually does something. So he's fighting back on behalf of not just himself, but the people of the United States, and trying to protect the president in an appropriate and legal way. And that's another thing that separates him from Roger Stone. So people need to remember that, because the spin today is to go with the flow, to go with the Kool-Aid, to go with whatever gets you bigger ratings on Fox News or someplace else. But the hard reality here is this is a simple indictment. It is if these facts are true, it's very perilous for Roger Stone. And for him to be trashing the independent counsel in front of this judge, and to be trashing Jerry, and to be trashing others, is increasing the chance for him being convicted.
Just doesn't help him at all.
No, it doesn't. It's going to anger this judge in particular, although, we'll have a jury trial. Judges control, to a large extent, what juries think. And remember, this is a jury in the District of Columbia. It's primarily Democrat jury, very anti-Trump. There'll be a lot of minorities on the jury, and I don't mean that in any bigoted way or prejudicial way. But this town voted 99% for Barack Obama. I don't know what the percentage was for Hillary Clinton, but it was probably very close. So this jury is not going to be friendly. And this judge essentially will control the thought processes of that jury.
See, it's interesting to me, Larry, as I'm learning more about the law and observing these trials and everything, I think a lot of people out there in America just have this notion that as long as they haven't done anything wrong, or if what they think they've done isn't wrong, that everything's going to be fine. But there's all these details and all these sort of machinations that you can get caught up in, that if you do the wrong thing from a strategic standpoint, you can really complicate the jeopardy that you're in.
Well, I don't mean to interrupt you, Jason, but yeah, it's out there today, okay? And you got to be aware of it, okay? And that's why you need a strong lawyer like yours truly to represent you. Because it is true that there is a dual system of justice. It's true that if you're pro-Trump, you become an enemy of the state. You become an enemy of the leftist state. It's true with regard to Nancy Pelosi that, and her colleagues up there, to use the term loosely, I would call them comrades, okay, that they want the president's head on a plate. And anybody that supports the president can be prepared to have their head chopped off as well. Okay, and that's the way it is today, particularly in the District of Columbia, whether you're talking about legal proceedings or whether you're talking about other administrative proceedings. It's an overwhelmingly Democrat town. It's like Hollywood. You know, they call Washington, D.C. Hollywood for ugly people, okay, which it basically is.
Yeah. And
ugly inside as well as outside for the most part. And as a result of that, you know, if you're going to take a strong stand in Washington, be prepared to defend yourself, but prepared to defend yourself truthfully and prepared to defend yourself without violating the law, you see?
Right.
And that's the distinction here.
Yeah.
Okay. And Roger could be sitting in the same shoes as Jerry Corsi today, not having been indicted, if he had testified truthfully and not threatened the witness.
Right. And so by threatening the witness, he made some kind of reference to The Godfather with the horse head in the bed talking about Credico's dog or something like that?
Yeah, something like that. I mean, I know Roger for way back. I haven't talked to him for 15 years. Mm-hmm. Okay. I have a long history. I don't want to talk about it here with him. You know. But, you know, I know the person that he is, okay, and that's why I have nothing to do with him anymore. But, you know, he revels in the fact that his heroes are Roy Cohn, and his heroes are Hyman Roth and The Godfather, which was Meyer Lansky. Okay, and that's why he uses these mafia analogies, because he actually thinks that's great.
But wasn't Roy Cohn somehow connected to Donald Trump as well? Doesn't Trump like Roy Cohn?
I don't know. I never talked to Trump. Huh. So it's, you know, what I'm saying is that, I'll give you an example. The Republican Senator John Kennedy from Louisiana, you know, he's a very smart guy, and he talks, you know, like Southern lawyers talk, in common sense. And he issued a video the other day, I guess, comparing Roger to Beavis and Buckhead, and said, you know, how stupid can you be to talk yourself into an indictment? You know, and that's in effect what Roger did, because, you know, he's so angered the special counsel, notwithstanding what he's alleged to have not told the truth about, and threatening a witness, that, you know, he gave them a big target to shoot at.
So this is the part of this matter that's really troubling to me. I get it.
An ultimate dirty trickster. I mean, who does that kind of thing? What? That's the reputation you want in life?
Right. Well, I mean, certainly, you know, it could be poor judgment to idolize mafia characters. It could be, you know, not the best thing that you could do. But I think a lot of people are feeling troubled by this 29-officer raid on the home of Roger Stone. What does the law say about when they can and cannot? I mean, can the FBI just kick in anybody's door at any time?
I don't justify it, but they, you know, when they did arrest him, they did a search of his house. They were looking for other evidence, you see, and that's the risk that Roger faces now. What do they have that they didn't have before from him? But when you're Jason, when you're idolizing the mafia, okay, and I'm not defending Mueller, but a reasonable person believe that you will respond to being arrested in a nonviolent way. Okay, if that is those are your idols. Okay, so put that in context. But yes, I think that the 29 were over the top, and I believe they could have executed the search warrant without having to do what they did.
Right.
And they would have done it before tipping off his lawyer, because they're not going to do that for fear that evidence is going to be destroyed. But they could have done it in a different way. Yeah, and that's scary. And that's happened to other people,
Right.
Similar circumstances have happened to my Bundy clients, in different contexts and everything else. I'm not in favor of that. But when you are boasting about the mafia and comparing yourself to that, then what are people to believe?
Yeah, I mean, I know that Roger Stone has said that it was a joke. I don't think that's a valid defense or a reason to publicly threaten people. And I think it's a good bit of sort of maybe a lesson for people to understand that, you say something on the internet or on television, even if you think it's a joke, you can't go making public threats against people. I'm really troubled by this incredible overreach that the FBI is taking, and it does remind me of Klayman Bundy. I mean, it reminds me of what happened to Michael Moore. It just seems like the FBI and Robert Mueller are, wielding this power like a gang.
Well, there's a world of difference between Klayman Bundy and Roger Stone. Okay, that
Absolutely.
has to be remembered. Okay,
Absolutely.
I mean, Klayman Bundy does not idolize the mafia. Okay? And there's a difference here. So remember that sometimes you get what you ask for.
Right.
And you beg it on. If you love the publicity and you want to flash a Nixon sign, I thought Nixon was a good president in many ways too. But yes, he was not a good president when it came to Watergate. And to have him, to walk out of the courthouse in Fort Lauderdale and flash the Nixon victory sign, when in fact Nixon hardly succeeded with a victory.
Right.
It's great. I mean, that's not real smart, unless what you really want to do is public relations and raise money and kind of be a wise guy. Okay, so wise guys sometimes meet their fate, and so they think they're smarter than everybody else.
Yeah.
And they find out one day that they're not.
I'm troubled by this dual justice system, because when I think about some of the other cases that I've gone to see there at 333 Constitution Avenue, I think about this guy, Imran Awan, who, I mean, I presented evidence that he had a server at 4809 Sprayer Street. Nobody kicked in this guy's door to collect evidence. They wrote a sweetheart deal for him. It's just such a disparity, the way that, because see, the thing that I'm trying to get to, Larry, and I appreciate your feelings about Roger Stone and the strategic opposition that he's presenting to clients that you're representing. I'm not trying to sway your opinion or get you to say or do anything. I just feel that there's been a plan that's been carefully executed, first to malign Alex Jones, then to malign Dr. Corsi, to create this infighting and to disrupt what was going on at InfoWars, because of course Dr. Corsi, Roger Stone, Alex Jones, these guys were colleagues, friends, associates not that long ago, but somehow something has happened that's managed to disrupt all that, put them all in very serious jeopardy, and get them all working together. Let's set aside the details for a minute. From the outside, an observer looks at this and thinks they're all just making a mess out of it.
Well, yeah, and see, I took the bait, and Jerry didn't take the bait, okay? The bait was handed over to him. Okay? He did not attack Roger Stone publicly. He did not do that. He never said he was happy to testify against Roger Stone. That was written by primarily leftist journalists, or people that were probably doing the bidding of Roger Stone at the time. Trying to whip up, see, any dollar that's taken away from Jerry with his defense fund, Roger thinks will be his, you see. So that's what this is about. And therefore you make Jerry the victim, so nobody's going to support Jerry's legal defense fund. And, it always comes down to money, you see. So that's the motivation here. But I'm not justifying what goes on with the people that are protected in Washington, D.C., the elite. I'm not justifying how the left gets off scot-free, how it's conservatives that, generally are, and Republicans that are getting the screws. And, in our Republican friends on Capitol Hill, they just roll over and they just, let them stick the knife in. There's no problem with that. They're not too smart. They don't fight like the Democrats.
Right.
But Dr. Corsi never sought a divide and conquer approach here. But when you're attacked, when you're defamed, okay, then you have to fight back, you see? And that's the situation he was put in.
Yeah. And again, my suggestion there was that the divide and conquer approach was somehow executed by people working in the interest of Robert Mueller, because again, I've seen things that happened months ago before any of this stuff came from Robert Mueller's office, where social media entities were attacking Dr. Corsi. There's a lot of people that try to spread information. I mean, it seems to me, Larry, just from observing, that there's a tactic whereby a target is selected. Alex Jones, Dr. Corsi, Roger Stone, me, you, whoever it is. And they start this sort of like low-level attack where social media puts out information. Just to made up a story and try to make the person look bad. And they want that story to get legs and to grow and to make its way into the mainstream media. It's been very successful with Dr. Corsi, Roger Stone, Alex Jones, all these guys. But it seems like an insidious process that relies a lot on social media. Have you experienced this at all?
Yeah, of course. That is the case. And then you have a lot of people out there, and I'm sure you encounter them, Jason, not your good viewers, but many out there who want to be, quote, part of the action, okay? They want to be players, okay? So they have to try to insert themselves. They threaten you. They tell you they have information that's valuable, and then if you think they're Looney Tunes and should be on Pluto, they get very upset, okay? So, I mean, there are people like that out there. And they sow discontent too. Most people are very good people, and they want to be helpful. But there are some people out there that are just agitators that want to create issues for people.
Right, and certainly beyond the malcontents that do this stuff because they got nothing better to do. I was speaking with Cheryl Atkinson yesterday, who's been, cyber harassed by the government. She was doing reporting on Fast and Furious and Benghazi, and she's now got a years-long case about intrusion into her computer. She's written the book, The Smear, and she's spoken extensively how players like David Brock and companies like Media Matters, and I mean there's many of them now, are paid. They're organized to engage in these tactics where they'll take a fake story, and it's the same thing we've seen happen with BuzzFeed and the New York Times. BuzzFeed or someone will post a story based largely on falsehoods. We've heard that this prostitute in Russia or Belarus or wherever she is has now admitted that she has no evidence of anything to do with Donald Trump, that she just said that to get out of prison in Thailand or wherever she was. But in other words, there's a lot of people putting out false stories, and then somebody takes that story and reports and says, oh, well, this Russian girl said that. I'm just saying that she said it. I'm not responsible for it being untrue. But yet they spread it to damage people, whether it's Dr. Corsi or President Trump.
Yeah. Well, today, for instance, I was on Newsmax. I'm going to put it up on my website. You can find it at newsmax.com with John Cardillo. And I don't want to name the person here, but there was somebody that came on that started to defame Dr. Corsi, call him all kinds of names. I think she was probably put up to it, frankly, by Roger Stone. And then she says she knows Julian Assange very well, has met with him,
really?
etc. Oh, yeah. And
well, why aren't they questioning her?
She said people can watch that interview. But I said to her, I said, well, why don't you go to the 4th floor of the courthouse in Washington, D.C. and walk in and talk to Mueller's prosecutors? Say this all under oath. Say it under oath, like Dr. Corsi did, rather than disparaging him and defaming him, on television. And these are the kinds of people I'm talking about. They want to be players, you see.
Yeah, agitators for sure.
People create issues for whatever reason. And I'll tell you something, from my standpoint, I don't turn the other cheek. Okay, I have a client to represent. So I told her, I said, you want to keep this up? You can expect to be sued. But why don't you go down to Mueller's office? Because if you've got information, he's going to want to talk to you. And I'll bet you anything she's going to wind up getting subpoenaed now.
Wow. Yeah, that's pretty stupid to go on television and say that you know Julian Assange when they're looking for everybody who could have spoken to him.
Yeah, he's here, and she's here and he's there. They can't reach him, but they could reach her real easy.
Interesting. Interesting. You know, it's just crazy, Larry. You know, take this opportunity to remind everybody to go and visit freedomwatchusa.org. There are so many cases going on that it's almost unbelievable that you can keep up with it all. Has there been any developments? I always like to check in on all the stuff we've been talking about. The FOIA case against Mueller, anything?
Well, yeah, we got so much stuff, Jason, and I hope people will go to our website, contribute with tax-deductible contributions. I'm going to be filing a appellate brief, you know, within about a month and a half for Klayman Bundy, because if his indictment is thrown out and he has to be retried, he's at risk of potential life imprisonment with his sons and the other defendants. We've got matters that I'm working on for Schaefer Cox, which was a similar situation.
Right.
We have lawsuits against, and I'll be filing pleadings, you know, in the next few weeks. You can read them at freedomwatchusa.org with regard to our class action against the social media, with regard to our lawsuits for Sheriff Joe Arpaio against the New York Times and other publications that defamed him. And, you know, it goes on and on and on. I've got a case down there in Texas for a Texas Ranger who was shot across the border by Mexican police. That's a very important case. You know, half the time I can't even remember all the cases that I have. I have to sit down with our staff every day and say what's going on and what's doing. I'm running around the country these days. I've been to Washington twice in the last 4 or 5 days. Yesterday I took a red eye, and the day before I took a red eye so I could observe what was going on at Roger Stone's arraignment. We can talk about that, the dynamic.
Tell us about that if you could. I'm curious to get your input. What was said, what went on, what was Roger's demeanor?
Well, it was interesting because I got there early, since, you know, I took the red eye and had some time to sit around in the courthouse watching what was going on outside the courtroom as I waited to get in. And as a lawyer representing Target, you know, I got in. I didn't have to wait in line. But you had all these very young journalists out there, most of whom don't have the experience of, you know, having lived during Watergate or the Clinton years or anything else. They're kind of bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. It's a great excitement to them, but a lot of them don't really understand what's going on. And then you had some old-timers like Dana Milbank, who's really a vile person. You know, he writes for the Washington Post. And some others. You had Pete Williams of NBC. He's more establishment, more distinguished, but NBC is not exactly a friend of the president. So it was interesting watching the dynamic. And as I was sitting there, Roger Stone came in with his 2 Florida lawyers in the hallway. They went into a side room, apparently to prepare. And they came out after everybody was seated in the courtroom, sat down. And the magistrate judge, she handled the arraignment. Deborah Robinson chided Roger's 2 lawyers who are from South Florida for not having filed the application timely with a local counsel to appear before the court. And this is an interesting thing, is that, you know, they apparently don't appear in front of this court very much. Roger would be well advised to get himself more seasoned Washington, D.C. lawyers who know the judge, who know what's, you know, the lay of the land there. They did bring someone in at the last minute to assist them so they could get admitted. But that was interesting. And the other thing that struck me when Roger pled, and I'll go through, you know, what happened, is that he was very contrite. He was very quiet. He was very respectful there. Fast forward, the minute he left, and he didn't make a statement to the press, he's flashing the Nixonian victory sign again, which I don't think was a wise move. And the day before that, you know, he calls what Mueller's doing a lynching. So he's almost guaranteed to be gagged on Friday by this judge, Amy Berman Jackson, who's a very partisan Obama appointee, pro-Democrat. For Roger Stone, as she is to Paul Manafort, she's the judge from hell. And it's not very smart. The other thing that went on at that hearing that struck me is that the lawyers which Roger had, which didn't seem that sure of themselves, okay, because they've not been, you know, at this court apparently that much, but that notwithstanding, they got up at the end and said they agreed with the special counsel and the U.S. attorney, who's going to also participate in trying the case of the District of Columbia, to designate the case as complicated, which means that they're waiving Roger's speedy trial rights.
Oh.
I don't know why they would do something like that.
Yeah.
Because the more time you give Mueller, given everything that they took out of Roger's house and what else they may be working on, interviewing witnesses, the more time you give them to indict Roger for something in addition to what he's already been indicted for. So that'll wind up in front of Amy Berman Jackson, too. So that didn't make sense to me, because the indictment, and people should read it, you can see it at LarryKlayman.com or CoursyNation.com, is exceedingly simple. It is not complex. Again, it's what we went over before. I don't need to relate it. It's not testifying truthfully. It's not, and it's threatening the witness. That's simple and straightforward. And I very much doubt that Judge Jackson is going to agree to designate this case as complicated. And you have to ask yourself, did Roger's lawyers agree to that because they're not prepared? Okay, because they don't feel comfortable right now. But if that's the case, Roger would be well advised to get himself lawyers who are prepared to move aggressively to trial, because I don't think it does him any good to delay this thing. And, you know, in the Bundy case, Klayman never agreed to it.
Never agreed to what?
To have the case declared complicated. But the judge overrode Klayman Bundy and his sons, and she violated Judge Navarro, the Bundy speedy trial rights. That's one of the things that is going to come up on appeal.
Aha. So in that case, the judge declared it complicated specifically because she wanted to not give them a speedy trial and leave them in jail rotting.
That may have been one reason for it, and also to give government time to prepare its case, you see, which they did obviously rather poorly and dishonestly, having withheld exculpatory information, suppressed information from whistleblowers like Larry Wooten and other things. But coupled with that is the fact that you had a top assistant U.S. attorney there from the District of Columbia who may be the one that tries this case, not the Mueller people, because they're not generally from D.C., except for Jeannie Rhee and a few others. And that may tell you that they want lawyers that have dealt with this judge to a greater extent and know the lay of the land in Washington, D.C. Roger would be well advised to get his lawyers that also know the lay of the land, at least bring somebody in to help the lawyers that he's got. And I'm not saying they're bad lawyers or anything like that, but you know, I think that was a real strategic mistake.
Yeah, and it's interesting, Larry, because I'm learning along with our audience as we go. You know, the law is sort of one thing, and then a lawyer knowing the law, that's like step one, the strategy. I mean, it's almost like poker, right? You know the rules of poker, but that doesn't necessarily make you a good poker player. There's all this stuff that you're talking about that's really...
Right. As George W. Bush said, you got to have a good strategy. You know?
Exactly.
Right. And you have a good strategy. It didn't look like they had one when, you know, from my observation. So they better get their act together pretty fast. But one strategy should be to keep Roger quiet, because the more you go after the special counsel in the situation he's at right now verbally, you know, it's what I've been saying about Trump. Don't go after the special counsel verbally. Actually do something.
Right.
See? And what good does it do to send tweets out that anger people? You know, the president should have been doing what I've done for Jerry Corsi, you know, bringing lawsuits, trying to get courts to intervene, to level the playing field.
Right.
And he had the way to do it, too. He was illegally surveilled. You know, they had illegal FISA warrants, but he's getting bad advice from his lawyers. So the thing seems to be spiraling out of control.
Yeah.
And, of course, now we learn that the special counsel, according to acting attorney Matthew Whitaker, is going to be issuing his report soon, and all hell is likely to break loose when that happens. You can expect impeachment, a trial in the Senate. The country is in great peril right now, and that's why we have been fighting so hard, not just to protect Jerry Corsi, but to protect the President of the United States.
Right, and that's also why people need to go to...
It doesn't do the President of the United States any good when, you know, someone who professes to be the president's closest advisor, informal or formal, is trashing the special counsel the way he's been doing it. Because that doesn't serve the interests of the president of the United States either.
Right. And the work that you're doing, Larry, is so important. We need to remind people to visit freedomwatchusa.org. You're talking about Matthew Whitaker, and I did see that press conference where he appeared with FBI Director Christopher Wray and U.S. Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross, where they were speaking about an indictment against Huawei and executives who had apparently conspired to steal components of a German robot that was testing cellular networks. I suspect there's something more going on there, but I just found it weird that these guys are getting onto Huawei rather than things that seem much bigger and more important. And I think that Whitaker seemed kind of uneasy when he was talking about the special counsel's report. Do you have any feelings about the way Mr. Whitaker spoke?
Well, he's neither here nor there. He's kind of in purgatory right now. The Democrats so destroyed him that that's probably why he's feeling uneasy. He knows that he's not going to probably be acting Attorney General much longer when William Barr is confirmed, for better or worse, as we've talked about.
Yeah.
But he's never been ready for prime time, and I guess you saw that during that press conference. And I might add, I'm more than disappointed in Mr. Whitaker, because I wrote to him on behalf of the Bundys, and I said, look, let's settle everything. There's no reason to continue to persecute the Bundys. They've gone through a lot. They did 2 years in prison. So did the other defendants. Why don't we settle all the lawsuits that we have? Never heard anything from him. Never heard anything from the head of the criminal division. Never heard anything from the Office of Professional Responsibility, the Inspector General. And, this Department of Justice has become the Department of Injustice. And it is a really serious threat to the continuation of our democracy. And of course, Robert Mueller works under his direction. So, where are these people? I mean, they're like ostriches that put their head in the sand to protect their own skins, but are not meting out justice. In fact, they're meting out injustice.
Larry, perhaps you could arouse their attention. Go steal some parts from a German robot. They'll be on it right away. Now, I think it's also important that we remind everyone, Dr. Corsi has rejected the plea deal. He is not working with the special counsel's office. When someone says that he's cooperating, doesn't that just mean he's abiding by their orders and not like fleeing the country? What is the difference between cooperating, or what is the state of what Dr. Corsi is doing relative to the special counsel and his criminal and civil suits against them?
That can mean different things in different contexts, but what he means is that, when he was asked questions, he answered truthfully, right, and that he provided all of his documents. Okay, so yes, he cooperated with the law, right, more than the special counsel. And I might add, Roger Stone has made reference to cooperating with the special counsel too, but at this point it's too late. They don't want his cooperation anymore. What they want is his head on the plate.
Wow, that's pretty scary. Now, you also mentioned William Barr, and I agree, he's pretty likely to be confirmed. Although this kind of slid under the radar, his confirmation was delayed by Democrats, of all people, who are saying that this is what they're saying. They say that they delayed it because they have concerns that Barr may not allow the special counsel to continue unimpeded and publicly present his findings. I personally find that to be not true, and I don't think that he's going to do that. What do you make of the delay from the Democrats?
Well, the Democrats, there's so many Byzantine rules in the Senate that, they had, by Senate rules, the right to delay. But it doesn't mean that Barr is not going to be confirmed as Attorney General, because in reality, he's the best friend of the Democrats, as good a friend as they ever had in Jeff Sessions. He said he loves Mueller. We know that his wife goes to Bible study with Mueller's wife. They're long friends. He says he's not going to rein Mueller in. He doesn't think it's a witch hunt. So this is all just a game. And, maybe they think they can get somebody better in there, but I don't think they'll get anybody better in than Bill Barr for their ends to take the president out.
I think a lot of people are very concerned that the president is making some critical strategic errors that could really cost him the presidency. I mean, I've heard so much. It's like, that's what I'm getting at, is that the fanfare surrounding Roger Stone and the Nixon stuff and all the people outside the courthouse, you know, lock him up and all this. It just, we're so far away from what the actual infraction is. I mean, if we're concerned about the election being interfered with, why is Robert Mueller not going after John Podesta? Why is he not going after Debbie Wasserman Schultz or any of the people?
And he should. And Jeff Sessions had the ability to order that. The acting Attorney General Whitaker had the ability to order that. William Barr has already hinted that he won't order that either.
He won't.
He won't. And, you know, he was asked that question, and he really dodged it. He did not want to respond to that. And why isn't the president doing this? He's the head of the Justice Department. He's the head of the executive branch. As long as he doesn't say that people should be indicted and convicted, he is perfectly within his rights to order an investigation. And he should have done that a long time ago. And now politically, it's more difficult for him to do it, but he still could do it. But the Democrats would use that against him, you know, to claim that he's using the Justice Department for his own ends. But that's not true. And attorney generals do have that right. Presidents do have that right. Presidents, you know, with U.S. attorneys, when they win the election, dismiss all of the U.S. attorneys. Okay, they have control over the Justice Department. And that's just a simple fiction that that's not the case.
I mean, Bill Clinton famously fired all the U.S. attorneys and installed all those. I keep asking this question, and I know you don't know the answer, but it's so frustrating to see Donald Trump there not acting. Is there anything that we can do to, like, sound the alarm even louder than what we're sounding? That, I mean, Barr is the wrong guy. Could the president withdraw the Barr nomination if he wanted to?
Yeah. You know, and I recommended another show that he appoint Bob Barr. Bob Barr is independent, you know. He's the one who along with me and some others, introduced articles of impeachment against Bill Clinton. I mean, we helped prepare them with him. And then we participated with him in that regard. So he would be a very good man to do it. And Bob was the U.S. Attorney for the Northern District of Georgia. You know, he has the experience to be the Attorney General. So you can go to our website at freedomwatchusa.org and sign the petition to urge the president to appoint Bob Barr. And Bob would appoint me special counsel. And I can assure you, Jason, this thing would be over really quickly.
Well, what could we do to supercharge this petition? Because I know people have seen it. You know, Larry, you and I have been talking about it. I feel like we're running out of time. It's been 2 years of Donald Trump, and so far we're not where I think most people who voted for Donald Trump want us to be.
That's right. And, you know, the president's got, I said this before, you know, facetiously, but it's true. You know, the movie Moonstruck?
Yeah. With
Cher and Nicolas Cage, where Nicolas Cage says, "I'm in love with you," and she slaps him and says, "Snap out of it." You know, the president should stop being in love with the establishment Republicans who are advising people like Matt Schlapp or, you know, American Conservative Union. These are lobbyists, okay? They're Republican establishment. They think conventionally, or the Federalist Society, which isn't all that conservative. It's part of this Washington Club. And the Washington Club does not think out of the box. And the Washington Club thinks about themselves. And the lawyers that represent the president are thinking about, well, if I do this, what's the impact on other clients or on my legal practice? And if you're representing the president, you have to go all out without regard to your own personal standing. And in the case of Rudy Giuliani, you should go on the wagon and stop doing all these interviews on television and actually do something. The guy hasn't done anything.
Yeah,
since
I agree
he's
with that.
presented the president. What has he done except, you know, disclose attorney-client information that's damaging to the president? So, you know, he may be getting a big kick out of it as the twilight of his career, but and maybe he's well-intentioned, but he's not doing anything to help the president. So he needs somebody outside of Washington who will go all out for the president. He needs somebody like that. And I've been urging that for a very long time, but you can't get through.
Yeah.
And
I think people are frustrated when they see President Trump filling his cabinet with John Bolton, and when William Barr is going to be Attorney General.
Well, and let's say this. Let's shift to another subject.
Yeah.
Now, what Nimrod told him to cave into Nancy Pelosi, that's exactly what he did. I mean, you can't sugarcoat it. You can't put lipstick on a pig. You know, my family was in the pork business, so I know that. You know, as a kid, I tried to put lipstick on a pig. No, I'm just joking. But, you know, these government workers, I was on a show last week with Armstrong Williams, and he has primarily government worker audience in Washington. You know, they could go out and drive Ubers, you know, or Lyft or whatever. You know, private workers get fired, okay? Private workers get laid off. To go on for a few more weeks to maybe get the job done and get your wall. It wasn't that you were destroying federal workers, and the average salary, most of them, is over $100,000 anyway. Or you can get a loan from your family, or you can do this, or you can do that. There's a lot more hardship in this country, but the bottom line is they had all that free time. They could have been driving, you know, they could have been doing Uber, making good money. You can make $200, $300, $100 a day doing that. So the president blinked. He pulls the trigger only halfway. He needs to pull it, figuratively speaking, the whole way. And he needs to do that with defending himself as well. And he's not been doing that. You can't be a little bit pregnant.
Right, right. Larry, there's people asking questions in the comments that I think I need to give you an opportunity to at least address for the time being. I think people need to understand that Larry is a lawyer representing a lot of people, and in the case of, you know, look, somebody says something crappy about me on social media and I respond to it, that's one thing. But there's someone here asking about the broadcast that Pete Santilli had yesterday, and I don't know that this is the forum to address it.
I'm addressing that, and that was libelous, and it will be addressed accordingly.
Got it. Got it. Yeah, and I mean, I think when people, you know, insult publicly or make statements about a lawyer, and then the lawyer responds by saying you're going to get sued, it's a little bit like punching a boxer. What do you think is going to happen?
Well, first of all, you can't make false statements, and I think you have to remember, and, you know, I'll talk through legal pleadings, but I don't turn the other cheek, Jason. I don't. And when people say things that are untrue about me or Dr. Corsi or whatever, they can expect to be sued. And we'll let the court ferret it out if that's what it comes to, if that's not retracted.
Right, absolutely. And of course, you're still representing Klayman Bundy in this ongoing matter where the Justice Department is trying to overturn the dismissal of their case and charge them again and throw them in jail.
That's right.
Yeah.
So I'm doing a lot of different things today. And, you know, I'm a big target myself by people that want to have an axe to grind. I've always been that way.
Yeah.
But I'm not afraid. I believe in God. You know, I'm Messianic. Okay, so I believe in Jesus and the Father. I'm Jewish of origin. I'm proud of both. But I know that he's with me, and I will do, with his guidance, what I think is right. And when people do things to try to harm me or my family or anybody else, they can expect the full treatment.
Yeah. Now, here's a reasonable question. Someone is talking about corporate personhood in regards to this issue. I don't know what that means.
I don't know what that means either.
Okay, that could be a stupid comment that somebody's putting in there. Well, Larry, we're close to the end of our hour, and this has been really enlightening in terms of filling people in on what's going on and the finer details of this whole Robert Mueller. I mean, calling it a witch hunt is almost just trite at this point. It really is a criminal investigation. What is stopping Donald Trump from just saying, hey, Matthew Whitaker, you're going to challenge the legal authority of Robert Mueller? It's just the politics of D.C. not wanting to go against the grain?
Well, it's the establishment is giving him bad advice. His lawyers are giving him bad advice.
But
you know, I mean, he has to follow. He has to follow his instincts, and you know, he does need to stop tweeting. Tweeting is not doing anything. It's not. It's making matters worse.
Right.
And you know, when you get flacks like Hannity out there running interference for him, you know, and if he thinks that Hannity's going to be the line of defense, he can forget it. I'm bringing lawsuits for myself, for Freedom Watch, for Corsi, for other people. I'm talking with action, not with words. Words are cheap.
Yeah.
Words are cheap. Okay, and I'm not here to boost ratings on my website or anything else. I'm here to try to get a job done, and that's why I say, Jason, whether I'm doing the right thing or not, I do believe that I'm doing God's calling.
I think you're doing great work, Larry. I mean, all the cases that you're on, I find to be extremely important. And, there's a big problem happening, Larry. There's a lot of people who kind of watch stuff on TV or read something on the internet and they think they know everything about it. Something that I've been observing over the past 2 years, going to these court cases, looking at the people who are giving testimony, looking at the judges, seeing a lawyer like yourself interacting with the judges. There are so many layers of complexity here that people who are blasting some stupid comment here on YouTube or reading a document that somebody has posted just because it's written out, it seems to have some sort of gravitas. We're just living in a world where people are spreading around so much false information and inciting other people to hate people and to ruin their reputations and ruin their businesses. It's so out of hand.
Well, it is out of hand, and that's why you have to fight back, Jason. And the president needs to do it, and I do it, and Dr. Corsi's doing it. And like I said, words are cheap. Actions speak louder than words, the old proverb.
Yeah.
And I've always lived by that principle, and then let the chips fall where they may. But if anybody tries to harm me or my clients or my family within the bounds of the law, they'll get the full effect.
Absolutely. And again, I think it's very important for people to go to freedomwatchusa.org. Read the posts that Larry has there about the cases that he's involved in, and you can check out his blog posts and his video appearances and things like that. But the most important thing to do is to click on that donate button, because Freedom Watch cannot continue without the financial sponsorship of the public of the United States of America. And there's no other lawyer challenging Robert Mueller. I got to question all these people that come up with these things. The timing when these attacks arrive is also very coincidental, I find. And, the other thing that I am often remiss in mentioning is that if people want to learn more about Larry's time in the Justice Department and his life and times as a lawyer in D.C., he's written a book called Whores, Why and How I Came to Fight the Establishment. You could purchase it on Amazon.com if you'd like to help finance a CIA-controlled retailer. But Larry, isn't there also some mechanism by which people get a book from you for free?
Yeah, I mean, if you donate over $250, I'll send my 4-volume work to you, the current edition of it. Mm-hmm. And you can go to freedomwatchusa.org, PayPal. Tax deductible, make a contribution, and if you want a book, let me know. I will send it. It's 4-volume work. It's called Essays of a Madman. It chronicles my history since I began to fight the Clintons back in the 1990s at Judicial Watch.
And what's happening with the Roy Moore case, Larry?
That's moving forward. They're trying to have it transferred to New York, Showtime, but I don't think they're going to succeed with that. It's a very leftist place. And once that motion is decided, that case will move forward.
Yeah. And one last comment from a viewer here. Jay Dixon Brown is saying that Mueller is just trying to prevent people from wanting to work with Trump. And that's obvious. It's the same thing that people are doing to me. You put up a lot of fake information. You attack every guest who comes on the show. You put in Federal Trade Commission complaints against the companies that I use to monetize the show. It's just interference. And it's really disgraceful. Larry is working very hard to try to hold Mueller's feet to the fire to make sure that we as people of the United States can expect justice from the Department of Justice. And Larry, I stand with you. I hope that you and Dr. Corsi prevail. Was there anything else you wanted to share with us before we wrap it up?
No, I think that's it. We need people's support, and people should discern who the real hero is here, and that's Dr. Corsi.
Absolutely. Larry, thanks so much for joining me tonight. I know you are very busy, and it was really generous of you to spend an hour with us here. And certainly anytime you want to come back on the show, you've got an open invitation. Larry Klayman is the guest, everybody. freedomwatchusa.org. Larry, have a great night. I'll speak to you soon.
Thanks, Jason.
Thanks for watching, everybody.